Hey guys, tonight we travel somewhere cold. Not snowy mountain ski resort, cold. No, no, high altitude, thin air, no oxygen, Peru cold. You're not wrapped in synthetic fibers or sipping a thermos of overpriced cocoa. You're in sandals made from llama hide, trudging up a ridge at 12,000 feet with a sack full of slightly poisonous potatoes, hoping they don't kill you or your alpaca. Above you, the moon hangs big and pale like an unblinking eye. The air smells dry like stone and old smoke, and every breath feels like it's being taxed. The landscape is barren, haunting, beautiful. There are no trees, just rocks, wind, and the slow crunch of your footsteps. You're on the Altiplano now, the high plains of the Andes, and the only thing growing here is your regret for not staying in bed. But if you lived here 500 years ago, this wind-whipped world was your refrigerator, and you had to make it work. Your ancestors did, and they were brilliant. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're following a group of villagers. They're not in a rush. Their pace is steady, like they've done this every June since time stopped meaning anything. Each one is carrying a woven sling of potatoes, small, dark, oddly shaped. These aren't the shiny supermarket potatoes you know. These are wild survivors, bred to endure harsh nights and harder mouths. You reach a clearing. The soil is rocky. The temperature is already near freezing. And here in this most inhospitable patch of land, the villagers lay the potatoes out in a single layer. Not in bags, not under tents. Just raw, exposed tubers on the icy ground, under the stars. No explanation. No drama. They know what they're doing. You might whisper, are they trying to kill their dinner? But actually, this is the start of something ingenious. The process is called chuño making, a freeze-drying technique, older than most countries, and smarter than your freezer's defrost cycle. No electricity, no chemicals, no gadget that makes an annoying beep when you open the door too long. Just night air, time, and a little barefoot magic we'll get to later. Now imagine this. The temperature drops fast, as it always does up here. The wind slices at your cheeks. The potatoes begin to freeze. Not just on the outside, they freeze from the inside out. Tiny ice crystals form and rupture the cell walls. The potatoes shiver in silence, already dying, but in a helpful way. Historians still argue whether this whole process was discovered by accident, like some sleepy farmer forgot his spuds outside one night, or if it was an intentional experiment with nature. Either way, the results are the same. Freeze the potatoes solid at night. Then, once the sun rises, let them thaw slowly. Repeat, night after night. Cold, warm, cold, warm. The potatoes begin to lose water. Not dramatically, but persistently. In the morning, the villagers return. You follow them again, your nose running and your toes wondering what they did to deserve this. The potatoes are examined, flipped, gently pressed. No rush. Everything here is measured in the rhythm of days and seasons. A kid slips one of the potatoes into your hand. It's stiff, damp, smells a bit like a cold root cellar. You ask if you should bite it. They shake their head with a smile that says, do that, and you'll be tasting earth for a week. The frost continues its slow work. After a few nights, the villagers begin the next phase, stomping. Oh yeah, you're about to stomp some potatoes, but that's not until tomorrow. Tonight, you just sit on a flat stone, wrap a woven shawl around your shoulders, and listen to the high-altitude silence. It's not empty. There's a hum to it, the buzz of the moon overhead, the whisper of ancient knowledge, still breathing in the rocks. You realize this isn't just survival. It's a science, wrapped in ritual, as methodical as it is mystical. And the best part, you don't even need to be awake for most of. The potatoes aren't much to look at. Honestly, if you found one in your kitchen today, you'd probably throw it away and apologize to your trash can. They're small, knobby, bruised with colors that don't look entirely legal. Some a soft charcoal gray, others streaked with dull purples and deep reds. But up here, in this stark and rugged place, these little guys are royalty. You're sitting beside a pile of them now, your breath fogging gently as you rub your hands together for warmth. A grandmother pats the ground beside her and offers you a seat. In Quechua, she says something that roughly translates to, "You don't choose the potato. The potato chooses you." You don't argue. You're tired, cold, and still haunted by that near nibble last night. She pulls one from her bundle and starts telling you its story. "This one," she says, "grows only above 3,700 meters. It tastes bitter, very bitter, but after chuño processing, it becomes edible, long-lasting, and nearly immortal." She calls it laque, which means sharp in the tongue of the mountains. You nod solemnly, even though the potato still looks like something you'd hide from dinner guests. What you don't realize yet is that these potatoes, wrinkled, weird, full of attitude, helped an entire civilization thrive. They didn't just feed Incan armies and fuel traders along highland paths. They were portable calories with built-in frost resistance and the guts to grow where corn and wheat wouldn't dare. Historians still debate how many varieties the ancient Peruvians cultivated. Some say a few dozen, others estimate over 3,000 distinct types, each one adapted to a slightly different patch of altitude, wind, or superstition. You can't help but admire the stubborn beauty of it all, farming not in spite of nature, but with it alongside it, even within. Tonight the villagers start spreading out more potatoes in neat rows. The moonlight makes them look like some bizarre crop circle design meant to confuse UFOs. The grandmother chuckles, sensing your amazement. "We plant them once, but we harvest them twice." She means the chuño process is a second harvest, a kind of post-mortem rebirth. But chuño isn't made with just any potato. No. Only the harshest, starchiest, and most attitude-ridden spuds will do. The ones with bitterness so strong it could end friendship. These have evolved, not for comfort, but for survival. Alkaloids in them fend off bugs, rot, and probably even bad vibes. Which is great if you're a mountain farmer. Not so great if you're a city dweller with sensitive intestines. That's where chuño comes in. By freeze-drying and later leaching out the toxins with water, the potato's bitterness mellows from unforgivable to earthy. The transformation is both culinary and chemical. You glance around. More villagers arrive with baskets and shawls. There's no shouting, no rush, just quiet, practiced movements. Everyone knows what to do. This is their version of food prep, and it's been going on for centuries. You realize you're sitting at the intersection of agriculture, chemistry, and spirituality, and all you brought were cold toes and skepticism. A boy leans over and places a potato in your hand. This one's lighter, drier. You squeeze it gently. It gives a little. He points to your nose and says one word, chuño. It's begun. You smell it. It's faintly sour, but not unpleasant, almost like a root beer that fell into a snowbank. This is what the process does. It drains the water, the bitterness, and the perishability, leaving behind a ghost of a potato, ready to live again when boiled, mashed, or tossed into a stew. But don't be fooled. The science is real. Today, we call it sublimation, the direct transition of ice to vapor, bypassing the liquid stage entirely. The Andes, with their wide temperature swings and high UV exposure, create the perfect open-air laboratory for It's like if your kitchen freezer and your backyard decided to raise a child together. Modern freeze-drying facilities would envy this natural setup. No electricity, no compressors, just altitude and time, and some clever footwork, which by the way is coming up soon. Still, there's something cozy about the way it all unfolds. You sit there, wrapped in llama wool, watching as dozens of little lives are slowly reborn in reverse. The potatoes aren't dying. They're becoming shelf-stable legend. Off in the distance, you spot a curious sight. A llama caravan making its way across a ridge. They're carrying bags, probably filled with chuño on a trade route that's older than most empires. The villagers give a small wave, and the caravan disappears into the dark like a dream you're not sure you had. And just like that, the night settles in again. The cold deepens, but now you're warm under a thick blanket and slightly potato-scented air. You're starting to understand the rhythm. Not everything in life needs to be fast. Some things, especially the ones that matter most, like food, trust, and fermentation, take their sweet, slow time. And up here, time is measured in moonrises and the soft crunch of frozen potatoes thawing with the sun. The wind's got a rhythm to it now. Soft, steady, slicing through the Andean dark like a lullaby, made entirely of cold. You wake to the crunch of footsteps on frost-bitten soil. The villagers are already up. Of course they are. Chuño season doesn't sleep in. This morning is different. There's a low hum of activity. A few of the kids are giggling. One woman is wringing her hands, preparing for what's next. It's time to stomp the potatoes. Yes, barefoot potato stomping. That's not a euphemism. It's literally the next step in turning half-poisonous tubers into culinary time capsules. You rise from your wool cocoon and shuffle over. There they are, a neat field of semi-frozen potatoes, lying in orderly surrender, waiting to be trampled like grapes at a very confused vineyard. The villagers form a line, remove their shoes if they even had any, and step into the field. You're waved forward. You hesitate, because your modern instincts say, this feels wrong. But the kid from yesterday laughs and nods, motioning for you to follow. Your feet hit the spuds. They're oddly satisfying to squish. Cold, damp. But there's a springy resistance, like stomping on snowballs made of memory foam. You're not jumping or crushing. You're pressing, squeezing, gently forcing out water and toxins through thousands of years of barefoot wisdom. This isn't mindless destruction. This is technique. Controlled pressure from human feet helps collapse the cell walls further, while also signaling which potatoes are drying too fast or too slow. It's subtle. It's ritual. It's science disguised as play. Some historians argue that the stomping was also a form of purification, both practical and symbolic. Stepping on something meant to nourish you later. That's an act of trust, of transformation, of letting go. Others say it's just efficient. Why not use the soft, flexible tool evolution already gave you, your foot, to extract moisture from a tuber? Especially when you've got dozens of family members with extra feet lying around. The debate continues, but the results are hard to argue with. By mid-morning, the potatoes look flatter. They've lost some plumpness, some dignity, but now they're drying faster, cleaner, no mold, no mush, just the slow drift toward preservation. A woman scoops one up and offers it to you again. You're wary, of course. But she laughs. This time it's not for eating, it's for smelling. You bring it to your nose. It's lighter now, drier, with a distinct scent. Earthy, almost leathery, like an old book left in a cave. The bitterness, still there, but fainter, mellowing. You rest on a stone watching the lines of villagers moving in time like a kind of sleepy barefoot ballet. Some are humming, others are silent. There's no rush. The Andean sun is rising slow and golden, not in a hurry to warm the day. That's good. Too much heat would ruin the process. The entire choreography is tuned to this strange in-between temperature zone. Cold enough to freeze, warm enough to thaw, and dry enough to wick away the water. The weather is your lab partner, or your boss. Definitely your boss. Historians still wonder, did ancient Peruvians design their chuño fields to match microclimates on purpose? The answer is probably. These weren't random patches of dirt. Some fields are oriented precisely to catch shadow or avoid it. Some are elevated for better airflow. You begin to suspect they knew exactly what they were doing, just didn't write it all down in a PowerPoint. You lean back and glance up. The sky is a sharp, endless blue, the kind that makes you feel microscopic, in the best way. And in that moment, you realize the chuño process isn't just about food. It's about working with the world, not against it. Later, as the sun climbs higher, the villagers begin to gather the stomped potatoes and lay them out again, but now on woven mats, raised slightly off the ground. This keeps them ventilated, safe from curious dogs, and elevated just enough to continue drying with elegance. One mat catches your eye. It's ringed with smooth stones, decorated with what looks like a small idol, a carved figure with bulging eyes and a smirk. You ask the elder about it. She shrugs and says it's just a frost god. No big deal. They leave offerings, sometimes bits of coca leaf or chicha corn beer, just in case, she says with a wink. You nod, pretending you understand, but really, you're just amazed that this much effort goes into a potato. A small child tugs your sleeve. She offers you a sip from a wooden cup. You take it. It's something between tea and broth. Smoky, warm, not chuño soup. Not yet, but it'll get there. The sun dips lower and the villagers begin gathering their tools. Some potatoes will stay out another night. Others will be moved to covered stone pits, to dry further. It depends on the cloud cover, the wind, the vibe. You follow slowly, feet sore but somehow satisfied. There's something oddly meditative about barefoot agricultural science at 12,000 feet. It clears the mind, toughens the toe. As the last rays of sunlight stretch across the field, you glance back. The stomped potatoes lie still, quiet, enduring. They're no longer just crops. They're in between things now. Not quite food, not quite memory. But you're not done yet. There's one more stop tonight. The cold bed of stone, where the oldest villagers say chuño dreams the deepest.
The air is brittle now, like it might snap in half if you breathe too loudly. The sun has bowed out, and in its place, the moon rises again, bright, indifferent, and very punctual. You follow the villagers away from the stomping fields, your souls tingling from the chill and your brain a little foggy from altitude. Still, something draws you forward. They lead you to what looks at first like a patch of particularly stubborn gravel. But look closer, see the low rectangular outlines? Those are stone beds, ancient and deliberate. Their Quechua name has been lost in translation, but everyone simply calls them chuño beds. You suppose potato slab doesn't have quite the same poetry. Each bed is lined with flattened stones, arranged not randomly, but with clear intent. The pattern is subtle, angled for drainage, spaced for airflow. Some even slope ever so slightly to channel meltwater away from the drying spuds. Historians still debate whether these beds were engineered with celestial alignment in mind. Some believe they mirror star paths or lunar cycles. Others think that's just modern humans looking for meaning in very symmetrical rocks. Either way, these beds work, and that's what matters. You're invited to lay a few potatoes out yourself. They hand you a bundle. The spuds feel lighter now. You'd swear they've lost half their weight in just a few days. You crouch and place them gently onto the stones. There's something sacred about it. You feel like you're tucking in little root children for a frosty nap. As you work, a woman explains that the stone retains a faint warmth from the day, encouraging the final bit of water to rise and evaporate during the thaw. Then, when the night cold returns, the freeze kicks in again, and over time,
This freeze-thaw-repeat rhythm transforms the potato completely. This isn't dehydration. This is resurrection through suffering. Chuño, you're beginning to understand, is not just a food. It's a philosophy, a lesson in what happens when something bitter is made to endure, not erased, not sweetened, but altered by patience and frost, into something useful, lasting, even nourishing. An old man sits near you. His face is a weather map of 1,000 cold seasons. He's quietly placing potatoes with a kind of reverence you usually reserve for candlelight or funerals. You ask why he's so careful. He smiles without looking up. These are for the ones not born yet. You pause. It hits you. Chuño lasts years. Stored properly, it can sit in a dark corner of a highland hut for a decade. No mold, no bugs, no rot. Just a little gray rock, pretending to be a food, waiting for the right pot of stew. That's the real genius here. Not just survival for today, but survival for unimaginable tomorrows. You look up. The stars are ridiculous brighter than they should be, as if someone dialed up the contrast on the universe. A few villagers have gathered nearby, sipping something warm, speaking softly. No phones, no flashlights, just moon, breath, and stone. One of them points to the stars and begins to tell a story. It's about a trickster god who tried to steal potatoes from the moon. He got caught, of course, and as punishment, he was turned into a weasel. And every time a weasel eats a potato now, it cries. You're not sure that's true, but you're also not sure it's not. And then out of nowhere, a gust of wind rolls down from the ridge and kicks up a few dry leaves. You flinch. A few of the villagers laugh. Wind spirit, someone whispers. He checks on the chuño. Right, of course, wind spirit. Why not? You shift your weight on the stone, letting your fingers rest against the cold surface. It's rough, but comforting, like a well-used tool. You wonder how many hands, how many feet, how many bitter little tubers have passed over this exact spot. You're not an Andean farmer. You've got central heating, and probably forgot you left oat milk in your fridge. But for a brief, drowsy moment, you feel part of something ancient and cold and wise. Eventually, the villagers begin to drift back to their huts, leaving the potatoes to their silent, freezing dream. One man lingers, placing a small carved stone beside the bed. For luck, he says, and good dryness. You don't argue. As you stand to leave, you take one last look at the field. It's transformed, no longer just dirt and rock. It's a quiet engine of survival, and in a world that often forgets how to wait, these stones have remembered. You trudge back slowly, breath rising in little ghosts. The chuño sleeps now, but not for long. Tomorrow the rot phase begins. Sleep tight.
Morning sneaks in like a guilty cat, all soft light and chilly apologies. The sun barely grazes the ridges when you shuffle back toward the chuño beds. The air smells faintly of dust, stone, and the sour-sweet tang of something just beginning to rot. Yes, we've reached that part of the chuño-making process. You've frozen, stomped, and dried your potatoes. Now it's time to ferment them, gently, lovingly, weirdly. You'd be forgiven for flinching at the idea. In your world, rot is bad. Mold is banished. Decay means something's gone horribly wrong. But up here in the Andes, a little controlled decomposition is part of the recipe. It's the secret ingredient that nobody wants to admit. Tastes kind of funky good. The villagers are already ahead of you. A few are preparing stone-lined pits, low, shallow depressions in the ground. Some roofed with thatch, others open to the air. These aren't just arbitrary holes. They're engineered, located to catch the morning sun, but shielded from afternoon storms. Drainage matters. So does airflow, so does time. Historians still argue about whether these pits were used for all chuño varieties, or only the Negro chuño,
the darker, more fermented kind. Some sources claim these pits doubled as ceremonial sites. Others suggest they were just practical cold storage closets for mountain folk who didn't own a pantry. Either way, they're part of the plan. You crouch beside one. A woman gently drops in a few semi-dried potatoes. They look not dead, not alive, just in limbo. The perfect moment for a bit of microbial magic. She sprinkles them with a bit of cold water from a gourd and covers them lightly with woven cloth. This step is not always talked about with pride. It's kind of the teenage phase of the potato. Moody, smelly, confusing. The fermentation that takes place inside these pits varies. Some potatoes grow soft and sour. Others harden into chalky block. The villagers know what to expect by the smell, the touch, the way it squishes when you press your thumb in. You try this, you regret it immediately. It's like poking a damp mushroom that's been emotionally neglected. The woman laughs and gives you a cup of mate de coca for the trauma. But don't be fooled. This isn't gross in the way you know it. It's purposeful decomposition, just like blue cheese, or soy sauce, or the time you left sourdough starter on your counter for 2 weeks and called it artisan. By fermenting the potatoes briefly, the villagers help remove even more bitterness and alkaloids. It softens what's left, enhances nutrition, makes them easier to digest and easier to store for years without turning into little biological weapons. The fermentation isn't universal though. There's chuño blanco, 2 white chuño, where the process skips this phase entirely and focuses more on leaching and sun drying. Each household has their own method. Each region swears theirs is best. Some folks say chuño blanco is for stews, chuño negro, more for breads and gruels. You wander between pits, watching the quiet care with which villagers tend to their rotting treasures. No one gags, no one recoils. This is just part of the cycle, like leaves falling, like relationships with mutual unfollowing. In one corner, an elder is singing softly while working. You ask what the song means. She replies, "It tells the Sanyo not to be afraid of the dark." You nod slowly. That tracks. As the day warms, some of the pits are uncovered and the potatoes are moved, flipped, aired out, patted gently like little patients recovering from surgery. You help, of course. One potato splits under your grip, revealing a gooey, pale center that smells of old socks and redemption. A man nearby offers you a bite. You politely decline. Instead, he breaks off a piece and chews it slowly. His eyes close, not in agony, but in reflection. "It tastes like my grandfather's hands," he says. You do not press for clarification. The day wears on. The air shifts. A brief storm rolls over the ridge, spitting sleet in sharp little bursts. The villagers move fast, covering the pits, tying down. You help hold down a woven lid as the wind howls over the stones. You think you hear the wind laughing, or maybe scolding, or just testing the chuño. That night, back in the warmth of the communal hut, you finally taste a piece. It's been gently boiled with herbs and mashed with alpaca broth. It smells better than it has any right to. You hesitate, then try it. It's chewy, earthy, tangy, with a weird but comforting aftertaste, like the memory of a thunderstorm mixed with mashed potatoes. You chew slowly. Your host smiles. "That's chuño," she says. "Strong food." It doesn't quit. You nod. You understand now. This isn't about taste. It's about trusting a process that takes time, patience, and a little rot. The chuño sleeps again that night, covered, quiet, but transforming still. So deep.
By now, you've realized that chuño isn't simply a food. It's a system, a biochemical ballet, danced across altitudes, seasons, and generations. And like any complex system, it doesn't work in isolation. You're about to discover how deeply it's interwoven into ritual, medicine, cosmology, and a peculiar local habit of knowing exactly how far to let something rot before it becomes magic. Tonight, You return to the drying pits, only to be led past them to a high stone terrace ringed with carved icons, faded offerings, and bundles of what look like dried herbs. A fire crackles at the center. It smells not of warmth but of bitterness and memory. You're about to learn something most visitors never do, that chuño making isn't just physical labor, it's a form of spiritual alignment. Here, chuño intersects with the sacred. The old woman from the night before, the one who sang to the potatoes, is there again. She explains, almost offhandedly, that chuño must sometimes be asked permission before it's used. Not the potato itself, but the alu, the ancestral spirit of the community, the land and the cold. You don't laugh, not anymore. She places several dried herbs, muña ruda and koa, into the fire, murmuring in Quechua. The smoke rises in thin blue columns. Then she takes a few older blackened chuño pieces and arranges them in a spiral around the flame. These are the ones that helped us during the last famine, she says. They deserve a place by the fire. This moment isn't decorative, it's deeply functional, blending ethnobotany with energy. Chuño wasn't merely survival food, it was a hedge against chaos, a reliable constant in a world of unpredictable weather, Spanish invasions, shifting empires, and hungry years. To the Andean worldview, where body, land, and spirit are one continuous fabric, chuño represented not just nourishment, but continuity. There's even an ancient word for this, samak, kase, harmonious life. Chuño is part of that equation, a food that resists spoilage, resists conquest, resists time. It sits humbly at the center of a web of rituals designed to keep the world intact. You listen as another elder recounts how, during lean times, mothers would grind chuño into flour and mix it with wild herbs to feed sick children. Not as a last resort, but as a therapeutic measure. The fermentation process subtly altered the glycoalkaloid profile, lowering levels of toxic solanine and tomatine. What was once a near-lethal tuber becomes a slow-release calorie source, surprisingly rich in resistant starches that stabilize blood sugar and promote gut flora. Modern biochemists, those few who bother to study highland survival foods, still haven't fully mapped the enzymatic shifts that happen during chuño's freeze-dry ferment process. But they know one thing: the Andeans, without formal lab coats or microscopes, engineered a perfect food preservation system, using only their environment and observation over millennia. Historians still disagree whether chuño was an Incan invention or predates the empire, potentially going back to the Tiwanaku, or even earlier pre-agricultural societies. What we know with confidence is this: chuño was ubiquitous. It fed armies. It filled tax quotas. It was stored in kulkas, those masterfully ventilated stone silos that dotted the Inca road system like checkpoints in a nationwide pantry. And the variety doesn't end there. There's taucosh, a lesser-known but equally pungent cousin to chuño. Made by burying potatoes in flowing water for several months, it's a microbial marvel of lactic acid fermentation. Often used medicinally, taucosh is still prescribed by Andean herbalists for gastrointestinal issues. You won't find it in most restaurants. You might not survive the smell, but it's real. Back by the fire, someone hands you a small bowl. Inside is a thin broth made from chuño llama bones and a hint of muña mint. It's humble, smoky, almost medicinal. You sip, and there it is, a food designed not to impress, but to endure. A flavor that hums with cold stone and long nights and deep knowledge. You're not meant to crave it, you're meant to respect it. Around you, stories continue. One man explains how chuño rations were carried across high passes, wrapped in llama hide. He claims they were sometimes used as currency, a tuber-backed economy. Another says they were hidden in ceremonial caches, buried for future generations, in case the stars turned cold.
You don't ask what that means. You're still processing the idea that potatoes have ritual burial rites. At last, the fire dies down. The chuño spiral is carefully gathered up and returned to a small woven pouch. Now they can sleep again, someone says. So can you. You curl up inside your thick poncho, the scent of earth, smoke and fermentation still lingering in your head. The sky is spilling stars. The cold returns, but this time it feels earned. You begin to understand. Chuño isn't just about making food last. It's about making memory last, about binding you to your land, your people, your own body. And in this quiet mountain dark, even rot has a purpose. The sun's barely begun stretching its sleepy rays over the mountains when you're already awake. Blame the altitude or the chuño tea dreams you can't quite remember. You step outside to the sharp scent of morning frost and something else. Something roasting, earthy, nutty, familiar, yet strange. You follow your nose through the rising mist until you see it, a large soot-smudged clay pot bubbling over a fire, tended by a woman, humming an old Quechua lullaby. Inside the pot, chuño, of course. This time, as part of a thick stew, blended with quinoa, wild herbs, and bits of sun-dried alpaca jerky. Breakfast of high-altitude champions. You're handed a bowl before you even ask. It's warm in your palms, steam curling upward like little mountain ghosts. You take a bite. It's chewy, smoky and oddly comforting. The chuño acts as both sponge and structure, absorbing flavors without falling apart. There's no crispiness, no crunch, just that familiar dense texture, like a boiled rock that knows how to love. A man sitting nearby chuckles at your expression. First time, it tastes like punishment. Third time, it tastes like childhood. You nod, too full to argue. Over breakfast, the talk turns to ancestors, not just the spiritual kind, but the literal ones. You're told that chuño is present in Incan burial sites, often placed in bowls beside the dead, along with coca leaves and chicha beer. These weren't just grave snacks. They were provisions for the afterlife, in case the soul got hungry on its journey to the other side. Historians still argue whether these offerings were meant as sustenance, symbols, or some combination of both. But one thing's clear. Chuño wasn't an afterthought. It was a companion in life, in death, and even in the realm beyond. After the meal, you're invited to the mummy cave. Yes, cave. You climb up a narrow pass, flanked by sheer stone walls. The air gets thinner with every step. At the end of the trail is a shallow cave, half hidden behind a tangle of shrubs. Inside, bundles of ancient cloth, bone and hair, wrapped tight, curled in fetal positions, their faces turned east to greet the sun. Inca mummies, preserved not by intention but by nature. The dry cold, the altitude, the sacred silence. You whisper, because even your breath feels loud here. Beside one bundle, there's a small crumbling basket, and in it, yes, you guessed it, a handful of ancient chuño, still recognizable despite centuries gone. It's shriveled, darker than any you've seen, and honestly not something you'd want in your soup, but it's still here, still itself. You reach out. Don't touch, just look. The villagers bow slightly. They tell you these mummies are not artifacts. They're abuelos, elders, ancestors, who still listen, still watch, still dream, and they still deserve their potatoes. Outside the cave, the world looks the same but feels different. You begin to understand that chuño was never just about storing food. It was about storing time, preserving identity, passing down resilience, like a family heirloom that just happens to smell a bit like wet chalk. Back in the village, the kids are playing a game that involves throwing small rocks at chuño pieces to see who can crack them. The game is loud, chaotic, and honestly kind of brilliant. The winner gets a gourd of sweet chicha. The loser still gets chuño, just a bit crunchier. You smile. You get it now. Chuño is woven into every part of life here, from children's games to funeral rites, from famine prep to feast day. And speaking of feasts, you're told a special chuño dish will be prepared tonight. Chuño futi, a celebratory mix of mashed chuño, scrambled eggs, onions and fresh cheese, sautéed over a wood fire. It's like the Andean version of comfort food. The villagers save their best chuño for this dish, the kind that's been aged for years, carefully rotated, cherished. You sit quietly as the ingredients are chopped. The sun sets, the mountains blush pink, then purple, then deep blue. Someone strums a charango, someone else sings. The pan hisses. You take your first bite, and in that bite is everything. Frost, fire, history, hardship, patience, and pride. It's not fancy. It's not trendy, but it's real, ancient, alive. You chew slowly, not just because of the texture, but because you want this moment to stay. You want to remember the way chuño crumbles just so, the way it fills your belly without apology, the way it refuses to disappear. And you realize you're not just eating food, you're tasting survival. It's barely dawn, and you're already squinting at a line of squirming, furry lumps on the ground. No, it's not a fever dream from last night's fermented chuño stew. It's guinea pigs, dozens of them, huddled in a tight row outside a thatched hut. And they're not here for lunch. They're here for the weather forecast. You blink. The woman beside you grins and says, "They tell us if the frost is coming." Welcome to the Guinea Pig Meteorological Network, arguably more accurate than your favorite weather app. These aren't just pets or protein. In the high Andes, guinea pigs, cuy, as they're called locally, have long been used in folk forecasting. You observe as several villagers crouch down, gently lifting and examining the small animals, checking their fur, ears, whiskers, and more curiously, how they curl up when they sleep. One cuy has burrowed deep into a woven mat. "Big frost, tonight," someone murmurs. Another is restless, twitching its nose rapidly. "Bad wind," says the elder. You laugh a little, until you realize they're not joking. Historians still debate whether this practice is superstition or early animal-based climatology. But here's the thing. Guinea pigs are highly sensitive to temperature changes and pressure shifts. They've survived in this terrain for thousands of years, not just as a food source, but as furry little sensors of environmental nuance. And when it comes to chuño season, knowing the weather means everything. One unexpected warm night or surprise storm, and weeks of labor could be undone. Spuds turning mushy instead of dry, growing mold instead of legacy. So, the villagers trust the cuy. You crouch beside one, a fat little guy with wild hair and suspicious eyes. He sniffs your hand, and then promptly turns around, showing you his best side. You ask what that means. Someone shrugs. Probably cloud. Another person explains that when they see guinea pigs eating more grasses than usual in the afternoon, it's often a sign that the temperature will plummet after dusk. When the cuy hide under each other, frost is almost guaranteed. They also check dew on stones, the direction of condor flight, and how far the llamas wander from the pens. But the cuy never lie. It's a different kind of knowledge. Not written, not graphed, observed, lived, remembered, passed down like your grandma's pie crust recipe. Messy, imprecise, and completely bulletproof. You move on with the group toward the chuño fields, where drying continues, now with renewed caution. Based on the morning cuy report, extra coverings are prepared. Mats are shifted, stones are rewarmed. Chuño isn't rushed. It waits, but it also listens to frost, to wind, to guinea pig moods. Midday, you find yourself near a cliff edge, watching clouds roll over the jagged horizon. One of the young men sits beside you and offers you a carved gourd. It's more coca tea, steaming and slightly bitter. You sip and he starts talking. Not loudly, just that soft rhythm of someone raised by mountains. He tells you about his grandmother, who once predicted an entire frost cycle just by watching a spider spin its web across the potato field. She said the web's direction told her where the cold would start. She was right. It killed half the other village's crop. Ours was fine. You ask if anyone teaches this anymore. He shrugs. Some of it, yes, but people like apps now, or radio reports. That's okay, but my mother still watches the guinea pigs. You sit in silence together, listening to the wind pass through dry grass and distant stone. There's no hurry, nothing mechanical. No alert pings, just the soft decoding of nature's behavior, and the memory of those who listened long before you. Back in the village, the kui have returned to their tiny wooden pens, chirping and shuffling like they own the place. You walk past them, tempted to thank one. He ignores dinner that night, includes chuño futi leftovers, reheated over embers, and a new dish, a kind of flatbread, made from chuño flour and roasted quinoa, lightly salted and soft as a sock. It's delicious. You're told the recipe only works with aged chuño at least 3 years old. You can't rush depth, the baker says, flipping a warm disc onto your plate. You nod. You've learned that lesson. Over and over. Later, the kids come around with kui in hand. One little girl holds hers up like a prize. He says no frost tonight, she announces. The villagers cheer. You cheer too. The potatoes will sleep well. And so will you. Because even in the cold, there's warmth. Because even the smallest creature can teach you something ancient. Because out here, the world isn't predicted by models and charts. It's whispered by road. The night was warm, by Andean standards, which still means you could refrigerate a soda by leaving it on the windowsill. You wake up with the unmistakable feeling that today will be different. Not because the weather has changed, but because there's something oddly energizing about freeze-dried tubers and guinea pig weather reports. You throw on your poncho like a seasoned chuño apprentice and head toward the communal hut, where the elders are already seated around a pot, steam swirling like morning prayers. Today's dish is called caldo de chuño, a hearty potato and lamb broth, with rehydrated chuño at its core. You sip it slowly, the way you would a sacred elixir. The texture is soft, but not soggy. The chuño has absorbed all the flavors of the broth. Onion, garlic, mint, meat, but still keeps its mysterious essence. It's like eating a sponge that's seen things, deep things. You're starting to notice the nutritional genius behind chuño. It's not just a storage marvel, it's a metabolic ally. Modern studies have shown that chuño, particularly after years of aging and repeated freeze-thaw cycles, retains a significant amount of resistant starch, which behaves like dietary fiber. In other words, chuño keeps your gut bugs happy, your blood sugar stable, and your energy levels surprisingly balanced for someone living at 12,000 feet without Wi-Fi. Historians still debate how much the Inca understood about the exact health benefit, but you can't deny the result. Armies marched on this stuff. Families raised generations with it. And if you believe the old stories, even gods refused to eat anything else after their first taste. You finish your breakfast and follow the others to a series of small stone huts just beyond the village. These are chuño storage houses. Nothing fancy, just stacked rock walls, thatched roofs, and narrow vents for airflow. You step inside and immediately feel the temperature drop. The air is dry, still, and smells of old stone and older potatoes. Burlap sacks line the walls, each filled with different types of chuño. White, black, big, small, hard as pebbles or light as cork. Every sack is marked, not with labels, but with symbols only the villagers understand. You ask an elder, and she points to one sack. That one's from the year my daughter was born, she says. Another? That's from the year the rains came early. The chuño is stored not by expiration date, but by memory. Each harvest becomes a timestamp. Each sack, a diary entry. And because chuño lasts so long, 10, even 20 years in the right conditions, these storage huts are as much archive as pantry, a living calendar of hardship and abundance, a timeline of frost and survival. You watch as a young boy helps his grandfather rotate the sack. The oldest ones go to the top now. They'll be used for stews and flour. The freshest ones stay on the bottom to dry further and settle in for the long nap. And that's when it hits you. This food is patient. It waits, not like fresh bread that pouts after 3 days, or avocados that riot after 15 minutes on the counter. Chuño endures. It doesn't demand to be eaten now. It whispers, "I'll be here when you need me." It's the ultimate emergency fund, but edible. You ask if there's ever been a bad year, a year without chuño. A man nearby pauses, then nods slowly. "Once," he says, "long ago. The snow never came. The nights were too warm. The chuño rotted before we could save it." "What did you do?" He smiles, though it doesn't reach his eyes. "We shared what we had left. And the next year, we made more than ever." You leave the storage hut, changed. You've seen pantries before. Organized, clean, efficient. But this is different. This is soul food storage. Each sack is a promise. Each potato, a quiet guardian of time. That afternoon, you help a group of teenagers carry sacks of chuño down to a nearby ravine. They're preparing for a trading festival in the next valley. A gathering where communities swap chuño for salt, dried fish, and fabrics. No cash, just trade, just trust. As you walk, you marvel again at the portability of chuño. It's light, dense in calories, and basically immortal. A kind of ancient protein bar with no packaging. You hoist a small sack over your shoulder. It feels like you're carrying the wisdom of 500. At camp that night, one of the teenagers pulls out a little frying pan and makes chuño pancakes. Thin, crispy edges, chewy centers, a bit of sugar sprinkled on top. You're stunned. "Chuño can do this too," he grins. "My uncle runs a food truck in Cusco. He calls them potato ghost cakes. Tourists love them." You laugh. It's the first time chuño feels not just resilient, but cool. You fall asleep beside the fire, wrapped in a borrowed poncho, full of ghost cakes and story. And just before sleep takes you, you realize something. You came here to learn how potatoes could survive without ice, but you're learning how people survive with ritual, with rhythm, and with food that remember. You wake up with the taste of ghost cakes still haunting your tongue. Sweet, smoky, and just a little bit weird. The kind of flavor that makes you question everything you thought you knew about potatoes. The fire has burned low, and the mountain morning greets you like a slap from a polite glacier. Today, you carry a single chunk of chuño in your pocket, a gift from last night's cook. He called it travel chuño, a small, dense nugget aged for nearly a decade. "It's like potato jerky," he said. "If jerky were haunted and blessed by the frost, it's surprisingly light, almost like volcanic rock. But don't be fooled. This wrinkled little fossil packs calories, minerals, and stories that could outlive your grandkids. You turn it over in your hand. No mold, no smell, no decay. It simply is, unchanging, unmoved by time, ready. Chuño is the food that waits." You join the group heading toward the valley where the trade fair is already buzzing. The trail winds down between cliffs and spiny grasses. A few llamas trudge alongside, tails flicking at imaginary insults. Their packs are stuffed with chuño. So is yours. You're becoming a walking tribute to freeze-dried defiance. By noon, you reach a plateau where color explodes in every direction. Banners, woven ponchos, bundles of dried maize, spices and baskets of chuño arranged like jewels in the sun. White chuño, black chuño, sun-cracked, pit-dried, hand-pressed. An entire gallery of edible fossils. You watch as villagers inspect, sniff, press. Chuño is traded like currency. A certain sack of 5-year-aged chuño earns 3 bundles of coca and a dried guinea pig. Another batch, less refined, only gets a few handfuls of salt. One old woman dramatically waves a particularly pristine chuño in the air like a priceless gem. Someone nearby explains that aged chuño is prized not just for flavor, but for its versatility. The longer it ages, the more it breaks down chemically, making it ideal for grinding into flour, for blending into doughs and porridges, for mixing into high-altitude beer. Yes, chuño beer is technically called chicha de chuño. It's rare, earthy, and more likely to impress your digestive tract than your taste buds. But it works. Everything chuño touches becomes more than it was. Historians still argue whether chuño trade routes were centralized under the Incan state, or allowed to evolve organically between communities. The truth, probably both. What's certain is that chuño moved from highlands to coastlines, from farming villages to royal courts. You wander through the fair and spot a group of kids making chuño candy, small chewy balls mixed with honey, quinoa flakes, and a little mint. For the travelers, one girl says, "Sweet chuño makes strong legs." You bite into one. It's dense, like if trail mix had a potato cousin who spent time in a monastery. But strangely it works. A little sugar, a little chew, and a whole lot of energy. Later, as the trading slows, an elder pulls you aside and shows you a woven scroll, an old quipu, the knotted string record-keeping system used by the Incas. He points to a cluster of knots and says, "This was a chuño inventory. From 5 villages, 27 bundles, white, 9, black, for storage, for war, for winter." It's surreal food tracked in fiber and knot, no written words, just the gentle tug of remembered touch. Chuño doesn't just survive the years, it documents. You sit with the elder a while longer, sipping mate coca and staring out over the fairgrounds, now buzzing with farewells and laughter. You ask him what makes chuño so important, really. He looks down at the chuño nugget still in your hand and says, "Because it holds hunger without fear." You turn the chuño over again. It's warm from your palm now but unchanged, still dry, still defiant. That evening, you help pack the leftover chuño for the return trek. Each family takes only what they need. Some trade everything. Others hold a few sacks back, storing them for a winter that might come in 2 years or 10. Before sleep, you sit beneath the stars with a small cooking fire and a pan. You try to make ghost cakes again. Yours turn out burnt and lumpy. You eat them anyway. They're terrible, but they taste like effort, and that's enough. As you doze off beside the ashes, chuño still firm in your pocket, you understand one more thing. This potato, this ancient, gnarled, unassuming lump, isn't just a miracle of preservation. It's a reminder that you don't always need things to be fresh to be powerful. That age can be strength, that silence can feed you, that resilience can taste like dirt, and still carry you up a mountain. You fall asleep smiling. You're officially a chuño believer. By now, chuño has quietly taken up residence in your soul, or at least your bloodstream. You're starting to crave the taste of it. Not in a hungry way, but in a kind of nostalgic yearning, like the way your body might miss the feel of a wool blanket or a long-forgotten lullaby. It's not just food anymore. It's a rhythm, a comfort, a quiet rebellion against perishability. This morning, your task is a bit different. You're not stomping or flipping or fermenting. You're headed to a workshop led by an elderly woman named Tika, who makes chuño flour, a finely ground powder from chuño so old it probably has opinions about land reform. You enter her stone hut and find her already at work. A simple hand-cranked stone mill sits in the center. She gestures for you to sit and hands you a bowl of black chuño. You recognize the type, fermented, aged, hardened, like it's been keeping secrets.
You start grinding. The sound is slow and gravelly. It smells like cold soil and thyme. Bit by bit, the chuño transforms into something silken, soft, almost airy, like the ghost of a potato whispering through your fingers. Tika watches closely. She explains that chuño flour isn't just a backup plan, it's an essential ingredient, used in breads, dumplings, porridge, and even ceremonial cakes. It can stretch meat stews, thicken soups, or serve as the base for highland gnocchi that no Italian would recognize but everyone would finish. Historians still debate how widely chuño flour was traded. Some believe it traveled farther than whole chuño because of its light weight and flexibility. Others argue it was mostly used locally, in villages like this, where every family had their own twist, grinding fine or coarse, mixing with quinoa or amaranth. You finish your bowl, arms a little sore, and Tika nods approvingly. She scoops the flour into a cloth pouch, sprinkles a pinch into a bubbling stew, and hands the rest to you. Take it, she says, for the road, for the future. Later, you sit with a group of teenagers preparing chuño bread in a clay oven. They mix the flour with water, salt, and a little wild fat. Llama. Maybe. You don't ask. They shape the dough into thick discs, then slap them against the oven wall. You watch as the edges crisp and crack. They pull one out and tear it in half. Steam escapes like a sigh. The bite is dense, chewy, and strange in all the right ways. Slightly sour, with a whisper of ash. Like eating history. You ask how long it'll last. They shrug. Months. One says, unless someone eats it first. You wander down toward a small mountain lake, with a few of the younger kids. They carry slings, stones, and a curious glint in their eyes. Apparently it's time for a game. Chuño skipping. Not eating. Not cooking. Skip. They each take a small, flat, chuño chunk. One of the failed ones too light or too brittle to be eaten, and skip it across the water. It's absurd. It's genius. You try, and your first one sinks like a guilty avocado. They laugh. You try again, 2 skips, then 3, then and for a moment, chuño becomes joy. Back in the village, an elder sits carving small chuño molds, wooden stamps shaped like suns, llamas and stars. He says his great-grandmother used to press these onto soft chuño before drying, to identify her batches during big communal storage years, like signing your name in mashed potatoes. He hands you one shaped like a condor, and tells you to keep it. For your chuño dreams, he says. You nod solemnly, even though you're not entirely sure what that means. But you will. At dusk, preparations begin for a festival meal. Everyone brings something. One family contributes pickled chili. Another, smoked alpaca. Your contribution, chuño flour, ground by hand, proudly presented in a cloth bundle. Tika winks as you drop it on the prep table. The dish of the night is choc, a spicy stew featuring chuño, lamb, chili, and wild garlic. It's hot, complex, and absolutely unforgettable. The kind of dish that clings to your insides, not like heat, but like memory. As everyone eats and the sky turns velvet black, stories flow. One man swears chuño saved his grandfather during a storm. Another says he once fed it to a dog, who then refused regular meat. One elder insists that chuño grows stronger if you speak to it kindly. You believe all of it. Because chuño is that kind of thing. It doesn't beg for logic. It asks only for patience and respect. You fall asleep that night, next to a stack of flour sacks, breathing in the scent of earth and ash, and something almost eternal. And when you dream, you don't see fireworks, or cities. You see a flat stone field under moonlight, and rows of potatoes, waiting to become legend. The village is quiet this morning. Unusually so. No crackling fires, no rustling mats, not even the low hum of gossip over coca tea. You wonder for a moment if everyone has packed up and moved in the night. Then you hear it, a slow, steady rhythm echoing through the valley. Thump, drag, pause, thump. You follow the sound until you see them. A group of elders hauling large sacks of chuño up a narrow trail that snakes above the village. The sacks are old, patched with decades of wear. Some are tied with strips of llama hide. One even has a feather woven into the knot. You fall in behind, not speaking. Nobody does. This isn't work, it's ceremony. At the top of the ridge, there's a small stone-walled plateau. You've passed it before and assumed it was just another drying field. But today it's arranged like a shrine. Small bundles of herbs, ash circles, a carved stone bowl filled with crushed chuño flour. This is the offering place. A woman turns to you and whispers. We feed the mountains once a year. Historians still argue whether these offerings are remnants of pre-Inca animism or evolved Inca ritual, but no one here seems to care what books say. The ritual is real, and today, chuño is not just food, it's currency between worlds. One by one, the elders untie their sacks. They take out pieces of chuño, not the fresh kind, but the old, the cracked, the nearly fossilized. These aren't fit for stew anymore, but they are perfect for memory. Each person places a piece near the stone bowl. Some add a pinch of salt. One pours a splash of chicha. A few simply close their eyes and press their hand to the ground. You mimic them. It feels strange, pressing a wrinkled potato onto a flat stone and hoping the wind notices. But you also feel something. Maybe it's the altitude, maybe it's the quiet, or maybe chuño, in its stubborn, starchy way, really does hold space for everything you've endured. They call the mountain Apu, a sacred protector spirit. Apu doesn't speak, but according to the villagers, he listens very well. They say if you leave chuño here, the mountain remembers your hunger and helps you avoid it next year. You sit in silence for a long time. Eventually, someone pulls out a flute, not to entertain, but to carry the memory of the moment deeper into the wind. The tune is old, uneven, beautiful in a way that never asks for applause. On the way back down, you carry one of the empty sacks. It smells of ash, sun, and potatoes that have seen too many winters. You hug it to your chest, like a borrowed heartbeat. In the afternoon, things return to normal, sort of. You help with chuño inventory, a casual but crucial process. Families open their storage pits, check for mold, weigh the sacks by feel. A woman pinches a blackened chuño between two fingers and declares it perfect. Another throws one into the fire to test its pop. If it cracks open like a seed pod, it's red. You're assigned to help count the ghosts. Chuño pieces that never fully dried, that smell a bit off or crumble into powder when poked. These aren't discarded. They're saved for fermentation experiments or added to compost. Even failures are useful. That night, you help grind more flour. This time, there's music, soft drums, and hand claps, and laughter that tastes of wood smoke. Someone makes chuño tamales, wrapping the dough in banana leaves brought up from the jungle in a trade last week. It's absurd how good they are. Sweet and savory, with just enough chew to make your jaw remember it's alive. While you eat, one man leans in and says, "You know chuño has moods." You ask what he means. Some years it's soft, others stubborn. Depends on the moon, the frost, the stories you tell while it dries. You nod, pretending to understand, but something in your chest says, that makes perfect sense. Later, you're asked to help with a special task, preparing a single serving of chuño for a birth offering. A baby was born last week, and tomorrow the family will take a bowl of soft chuño stew to a nearby spring. As thanks, you help mash the pieces by hand, mix in mint, and shape the final portion with care. It's not big, but it doesn't need to be.
It's symbolic, a way of saying, this child will never know hunger, a prayer in starch form. You carry the bowl to the spring, just after sunrise. It's quiet, except for birds, and the sleepy trickle of water over stone. The mother places the bowl at the edge, and whispers something you don't catch. The chuño stays there. It will be gone by noon, eaten by birds, or dissolved by sun, or maybe swallowed by the mountain. That's not the point. The point is that it was given. As you walk back to the village, empty bowl in hand, you feel something shift. Chuño isn't just about staying alive. It's about marking life itself. Birth, death, memory, winter, trade, celebration, all wrapped into a lumpy, freeze-dried fragment that carries weight far beyond its size. And you realize, chuño doesn't care who you are or where you're from. But if you treat it right, it will remember you.
This morning, the air feels thinner, not just because of the altitude, but because your time here is winding down. You feel it in the way the villagers nod at you now, not as a stranger, but as someone who knows the taste of wind-dried potato skin and the warmth of stone-walled kitchens. Your last few days are less about doing, more about watching, witnessing. The villagers move slower now, not because they're tired, but because the harvest is winding down. Chuño season is nearly done. The potatoes have been frozen, stomped, dried, fermented, blessed, stored, cooked, and offered. Now comes the final, underrated phase, waiting. You sit beside the storage hut and help label sacks, not with names, but with colors, stitches, and tiny charms woven into the corners. One sack has a single white feather. Another has a red thread spiraled around its lip. Each family has a code. You don't need barcodes when you have stories. A teenager shows you a notebook she's been keeping. It's in both Spanish and Quechua, line after line of entries, like Kilo Chuño Negro, 12 kilos, stomped 3 nights, frost 4 times, final weight 6.5 kilos. Rot rate low, fermentation gentle, smell honest. You ask what honest means. She smiles. If it tells the truth when you boil it, you nod like that's perfectly rational. Later, you're invited to help with a chuño tasting. Yes, that's a thing. A small gathering of elders, sitting cross-legged in a circle, each with a few samples laid on woven mats. The rules are simple. Each person presents a piece of chuño they're proud of, aged just right, stomped at the perfect moon, stored through difficult weather, and the others taste, nod, frown, or smile. It's the most serious potato-based judging panel you've ever seen. You're given a spoon. You're allowed to try 3. You do. One is creamy, mellow, almost nutty. The next is sharper, a little sour, but pleasantly earthy, like licking the inside of a rain cloud that once touched a root. The third tastes like a secret, bitter at first, but then strangely warm, like a potato that forgives you. One elder says, "That one reminds me of my uncle's silence." You don't ask. Historians would be delighted to know this part. Most discussions about chuño end at food security and survival. But here, chuño is also an aesthetic experience. Its flavor isn't fixed. It shifts with the weather, the storage, the conversation you had while laying it on stone. Chuño becomes a mirror, and mirrors in these mountains aren't always shiny. You spend the afternoon walking with one of the elders to a high ridge where long ago a colca, an Inca-era food storage silo, still stands, or rather what's left of it. Stones sunken, walls crumbled, but the shape is unmistakable, circular, vented, facing the wind, just right. He says it hasn't been used in generations, but they still keep it clear of weeds, because it remembered us. We should remember it. Inside, he places one piece of chuño perfectly aged, slightly cracked, on a flat stone in the center. This is for the ancestors, he said, not because they're hungry, but because we are. You sit with that for a while. The sky is sharp and enormous above you, the clouds slow as mountains. Before you leave, he hands you a small cloth pouch. Inside, 3 pieces of chuño, one black, one white, one mixed, for when you forget what patience feels like. He says, you return to the village quiet, thoughtful, and carrying food that doesn't rot, only waits. That night, they throw a farewell meal, nothing extravagant, just people, laughter, music, and food that tastes like long memory. Chuño stew, chuño bread, chuño tamales, and your now beloved ghost cakes, improved slightly. One child offers you a drawing, a potato with a cape, flying over a mountain. It's super chuño, he says. He never goes bad. You tape it inside your notebook. Later someone lights a fire, and stories flow like chicha. One woman says, chuño was once used to measure time. Another says her grandmother put a piece under her pillow to dream of the weather. They ask you what chuño means to you now. You think a moment, then say, it means something can be broken, stomped, and frozen, and still be good. They nod. You've passed. That night, your sleep is deep, not because you're tired, but because you've absorbed something timeless. You wake just before dawn. Your pack is light, except for the pouch of chuño, a few notes, the condor stamp, and a hard-earned hunger for the simple enduring things. Outside, the frost has kissed the ground again. The chuño, like always, is ready. The next morning arrives without drama. No thunderclap, farewell, no cinematic sunburst, just the same cool hush you've come to love. The frost glistens across the stones, like sprinkled salt. You stretch slowly, aware this will be one of your final days in this quiet, stubborn, glorious place. Today's plan, no plan. The villagers say it's best this way. Let chuño guide you. They joke. You half expect a potato to roll up and point the way. So you wander. You walk past drying racks that are now mostly empty, past fields once crowded with shivering spuds, now returned to stillness, past the communal fire circle, where yesterday's ashes still hold the ghost of warmth. And then, down a narrow trail that winds toward the lower hills, you stumble onto something unexpected. An open-air school. It's nothing fancy, just a half circle of benches made from logs, a chalkboard propped against a rock, and about a dozen kids. The teacher, a soft-voiced man named Armando, waves you in. Today's subject, chuño logistics. Yes, logistics. You sit beside the smallest bench and listen. The kids are calculating estimated weights, storage capacities, and trade ratios. One girl stands and confidently explains how many kilograms of chuño her family can carry on 2 llamas over a 3-day hike. Another boy calculates how long a 20-kilo sack of chuño will last if a family of 5 eats it twice a day. The answer, longer than your Wi-Fi router's lifespan. Armando explains that these lessons aren't just academic, they're life skills. Chuño is still traded today, not just for food but for tools, clothes, sometimes even school supplies. And knowing how to manage it means knowing how to survive and thrive. Historians sometimes assume traditional foods are just artifacts, leftovers of a past clung to out of habit. But here, chuño isn't just historical. It's current, in real time, in real lives. You glance at the chalkboard. There's a small drawing in the corner, a potato shaded like a skull labeled Plan B. The teacher laughs. That's when all else fails. Chuño is always Plan B. One of the older students adds, it's also Plan C, sometimes Plan D. You head back toward the village and pass by the riverbank, where a few women are soaking chuño. This is one of the final steps, rehydration. After months or years of storage, chuño can be brought back to life. All it needs is time and water. You watch the transformation: hard, dry nuggets, slowly softening, color returning, texture shifting from ancient to edible. It's like watching a fossil dissolve into soup. A woman hands you one of the rehydrated pieces. You press your thumb in. It gives. It's ready, she says.
Just 2 hours ago it was rock. Now it's food again. You begin to wonder, how many things in life only need time and water to return? How much of what we think is dead is simply waiting to be soft? As evening settles in, you're invited to one final chuño-based tradition. It's simple, but sacred. Everyone brings a piece of chuño from home, their best, funniest, or most cursed. They place them in the center of the communal fire circle. One man brings a chuño that looks like a miniature goat. A child presents one with a perfect heart shape. An elder lays down one from the year of the great snow, still marked with an old scorched scar. Then everyone tells a story, not about the potato itself, necessarily, but about the year it came from, the people they were, the mistakes they made, the things they lost, the meals that held them together. The chuño doesn't speak. It listens. It absorbs every tale like it has for centuries, not judging, just remembering. And then, gently, someone scoops them up and places them back into their sacks, because stories are important. But storage is sacred. You sit quietly long after the circle breaks. The stars above you blink like distant campfires. The air smells like ash and memory. You take out the pouch of chuño the elder gave you, 3 pieces. You place one beside your sleeping mat, one in your pack, and hold the third in your hand. You whisper something to it, not a prayer, not a question, just a small truth you don't want to forget. The chuño doesn't respond. It doesn't need to. It's already keeping it safe. You wake to your final morning in the mountains, and the world feels like it's holding its breath. No wind, no birdsong. Even the kiri are quiet. The air is still, heavy with meaning, but not in a sad way. Just aware, like the mountain knows it's time to let go. You step outside and take one last look around. The chuño beds are empty now. The stone platforms, once alive with frost and footsteps, sit silent under the soft light. A few stray potatoes linger on the edges, forgotten or maybe left on purpose. Offerings, or testaments, or both. The village hums gently to life. There's no big goodbye, just nods. A few claps on the back. Someone hands you a woven cloth bag, filled with chuño flour. Someone else sneaks 2 chuño ghost cakes into your coat pocket when you're not looking. You try to say thank you, but the language feels too small. So you just stand there a moment longer, breathing, remembering. Eventually you begin the walk down the path that winds back toward the lowlands, toward cities and noise and melting ice cubes. And deadline. The air thickens with every step. The sun grows warmer. Your phone even gets a signal again, but you ignore it. You reach the edge of the village and pause. You take out the last piece of chuño from your pouch, the mixed one, the one shaped like a curled comma. You dig a small hole beside the trail and place it in the soil, not as an offering, not even as a symbol, but because chuño waits, and maybe one day someone will find it, soften it, boil it, turn it into soup and memory, or maybe it will just stay there quietly holding the echo of everything you learned. And so, you walk on, down the hill, beyond the frost line, into the places where time moves faster, and potatoes are never given the chance to grow old. But a part of you stays behind, a part that remembers the cold stone under your feet as you stomped in the moonlight, the bitter steam rising from a bowl of chuño stew. The way a child's drawing made you believe that even a potato could wear a cape and fly. You carry that weight, not heavy, but grounding. You carry the silence, the patience, the lesson that food can outlive seasons, wars, and doubt if we only give it space to breathe, freeze, ferment, and return. Now, let your own breath slow. Let the mountain air fade from your lungs, but not your memory.
Let your heartbeat match the rhythm of frost thawing on stone. Let your thoughts soften like a chuño soaked just long enough to forget its suffering. You're not just going to sleep, you're entering the storage hut of your mind, where everything that matters waits in silence, where hardship isn't erased, but transformed, preserved, held, remembered, and in the deepest part of you, something small, something humble, something shaped like survival, whispers back,